Hey, it's Kevin with the New Warehouse podcast on site here at the Element Logic Trade Show. And sitting next to me is Brian Kirst of SnapFulfil. And we talked to Brian early in October, right? End of September, right? End of September, about how to get ready for peak. And we're going to revisit that topic a little bit, but we're going to talk about what to do post-peak after you've been through the madness, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, well, I guess tell us a little bit about SnapFulfil in case people don't know SnapFulfil yet.
So SnapFulfil, we are a tier one WMS, cloud-based WMS provider. Our a differentiator is our rules engine, our speed to value. So we're highly configurable, tier one functionality within the four walls. We deploy in 45 to 70 days, and we really provide operations with the ability to scale and flex and adapt to the changing demands of the warehouse environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's been on the show a couple times, right? So we talked about, getting ready for peak in our last conversation there, and how to make sure all systems are go, right? I think is what we called it. But now when we look past peak, and you have unique experience as we've talked about before, because you're on the system side now, but you had 3PLs of your own, you worked in 3PLs, so you've lived through peak, really lived through peak, right? So tell us a little bit about, it's January, Q1, we're past peak, maybe we're dealing with some return spikes now, right? But how do we kind of look at that Q4 peak season and really assess, like, how do we do and where do we need to improve for next year?
Yeah, I think that planning for your next peak starts to happen in January.
Yeah.
So that look back, that post-mortem autopsy, if
The
you will,
autopsy, yeah.
starts to happen right away. You will deal with the initial spike in returns. So making sure going in, you have a robust reverse logistics returns process in place and that your systems can handle that effectively for your customers is key. But then looking at, did you meet SLAs? Were there challenges within customers that were unexpected? Were there challenges with your systems and your process that caused you unexpected delays, unexpected obstacles in delivering the service that you require, especially as a 3PL? And if you're a brand and a first-party operation, really seeing what that customer feedback is, and then how you can relay that back to your 3PL if you have a 3PL or within your own operation, making those improvements. Q1's a really good time to do it too, because a lot of your trade shows, a lot of your new products come out in Q1. A lot of new technologies will start to hit the market. So you could start to plan, do we need to make major changes? Like, do you need a new WMS? Do you need to implement new technology or automation? Is that on your roadmap? Those are great plans to start and make decisions in Q1, so you could start the process of implementation Q2, Q3, and be ready for your next peak.
Yeah, absolutely. And tell us a little bit, because sometimes you come out of peak, right? And you're just like, oh, some of the technology or the system I had just couldn't handle what I was going through, right? And there was a lot of gaps there potentially. So I need to find something else for my next peak, right? So how does that timeline kind of work, right? If you're making that assessment, you're making that decision, like, okay, it's time we need to start looking around. I mean, when in the year? I mean, obviously earlier the better, I'm sure, right? But when realistically does somebody need to start in order to be up and running and get used to the system? What does that timeline actually look like?
So depending on the system, if the biased view from SnapFulfil, our perspective is we implement fairly quickly. We typically say 45 to 70 days. I'd say most 3PL environments, we're above that 70 or around that 70 days, maybe a little more because of the complexity of 3PLs by nature. So getting started with that as early in the year as possible so that you can have a full transition over to a new solution, whether it's a WMS or some other software. I think in that January, February timeframe, you start to have those conversations around, I wish we should have done, we could have done. I would say the first thing to do is engage with your current providers and your partners to say, hey, this is where our performance was. How could your system help us? How can we partner to make it better? A lot of times, folks don't ask those questions, and they're not aware of features and functionality within their current systems that they could have implemented and deployed for their peak season. So finding out, have you maximized all of the features of your automation, of your software? and then look at those other partners that you might be using, TMS, OMS, wherever those lie, and have those same conversations. Once you realize you maximize or you need to make a move or you want to augment, start to look at all the great automation that's here today with your super exciting, then that process should start. You should be in that process by end of Q1.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I think that's great advice there. And you mentioned, having a system and maybe not fully taking advantage of all the features of the system.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, why do you think that happens, right? Like, why do you think somebody gets a system and maybe they don't realize that there's certain things that they can do, or there's some certain functionality they have access to?
I mean, it's a relationship. It's a partnership, right?
Sure.
So there should be engagement always with your vendor, your partner, as well as from the vendor side with your customers. So just recently, we had our account management team talking about how they engage with our customers. Our approach is very much a proactive engagement. So we're constantly reaching out to customers to see what are they doing, what are their plans, making sure that there aren't pain points that we could be addressing. We don't want to wait until those pain points become very impactful to the operation so that there's a negative tone. We want to be proactive, and it's very much a relationship. So really, I think the challenge becomes there's a lack of communication and maybe the wrong type of partnership. Maybe it's a very vendor-customer transactional partnership where you need to bring it more into a relationship posture. So having those conversations, asking the questions, not only of your own team, but bringing in your partner as you're starting to explore. We encourage our customers, if they're exploring if they're adding new sites or they're adding new technology, bring us into that conversation. We likely have partners. We're partners with many of the vendors here today that we can bring to the table to accommodate their need that we're familiar with. We know it's a tested and successful solution. So having those conversations, don't have them in a silo, especially if you have a lot of technology.
No silos.
No silos.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really interesting because we do see, like yourself, like SnapFulfil, right, where there's new features that roll out, right, and a lot of times I talk to some 3PLs or I see like 3PL conversations between 3PLs, and they're like, oh, you can do that on that system. Like we have that system, but we didn't even know we could do that, right? And it's very interesting to see sometimes where that knowledge gap is, and I'm curious, like, how do you kind of maybe train the users, right, to be a little more curious, a little more like exploratory, because I think maybe too sometimes it's like, I don't know if I want to try a new feature, like, is it going to break something?
Right? And speaking from the user side, right? You sometimes get lost in the detail, and you're very focused on your own operation, and you start to feel like, I own this, I have to make it more efficient through process change or without bringing in the partner to say, hey, this is what we have, this new customer, this is what we're doing. We very much get lost in the detail. So it is a matter of reaching out, utilizing from the software side, from the vendor side, the technology that we have. So we have a lot of internal CRM. So we're prompting our account managers to reach out before the customer reaches out to us. And we're not looking to ring the cash register usually. We want to make sure that our relationships are deep and sticky, and we're adding value to the operation so that we don't find ourselves in issues where we're getting we're not renewing and having that long-term engagement. So we really want to engage with our customers, and I encourage customers to engage with their vendors, because you're right, a lot of times the answer to the question is, oh, I didn't know it could do that. I didn't know I could do that in your system. And you don't want to hear that 6 months after they've transitioned away. You want to get that question ahead of time and be proactive in the approach.
Yeah, interesting, and great point there. And so if we look at 2026 here and the year ahead of us, right?
Yeah.
What from a 3PL perspective, like, what do you see are some of the trends, and what do you think 3PLs are going to be really interested in and focused on this year?
We've talked about it a little bit before the peak, and I think it's going to be a continuing concern around labor and labor scarcity. I think, how do we deploy AI in the warehouse? And how do 3PLs take advantage of automating some of those tasks that are right now very manual? not looking to replace labor, but address the labor scarcity issue, because right now there's not enough labor to accommodate what the warehousing industry needs. So being able to augment that with new technology, I'm super excited on the technology side to see what's coming next year from
Yeah.
AI. There's a lot of exciting things happening at SnapFulfil and elsewhere.
Yeah.
Keep an eye out on us as the trade
I've
show
heard some
season
rumblings. I've heard some rumblings.
kicks off. Yeah, we're really excited. We're looking forward to 2026 and what we're gonna offer to the industry and the warehouse space. We've heard what the needs are. We see where the industry's going, and I think the focus on more intelligence, more resiliency, more flexibility and adaptability within the warehouse is what's needed, and we feel like we're going to be addressing that this year.
Yeah, fantastic. And I'm curious from the AI perspective, like what have you seen are some really kind of interesting use cases for AI in the 3PL space specifically? Because I've seen some myself, and I'm like, I didn't even think about that, right? That these operators are just kind of like coming up with and spinning things up. Like what have you seen that's interesting?
Yeah, so I think the obvious and we see that a lot is going after the labor intense pieces like picking and
Yeah.
or the perceived labor intense. I'll say that, but I do believe that all of my friendly competitors in the WMS space, we have really good picking algorithms, and so the AI will help. But I think where AI is going to have more of an impact is around monitoring and process improvement and process documentation, tasks that are very labor intensive right now, but can be simplified by AI to allow the leaders of the warehouses and the operations to focus more on SLAs and KPIs and delivering the success rather than getting into defining process, training process. So the AI impact on the people perspective and getting folks up to speed, and then helping to monitor and exception handle is where I see a lot of value, and where I'm more interested in what folks are doing with that rather than the where you might trend to the
Yeah,
easy
yeah.
wins.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a really interesting thing because I think that I think back to my time as a warehouse manager, and I had some warehouse managers like reporting to me too at one point, and and I'm like a data guy, right? So I mean, I was a data guy. I guess I'm not so in the weeds now, right, in the warehouse, but I was very into the data, and like I like to dig through the data and put stuff together and find out like what's the root cause. But I had some warehouse managers reporting to me, and they're like, I hate Excel, right? Like, I don't want to look at data,
Exactly.
right? So I think for me, like I see that AI being like such a key factor in like expanding, the insights that like that warehouse manager can get,
Yep.
and then going out and like taking the action, right? And stopping to kind of like kick that analysis down the road, right? Because you're just like you don't want to analyze, or that's not really like your knowledge space, right? So I think that's very interesting to see. So when you look at kind of and I want to ask you because you said something in there. You said the perceived labor intensive tasks, right? So what do you mean by that?
Well, I think it's an easy win, or it's the buzzword right now is AI,
Sure.
and when you go into a warehouse, you assume the most labor intense thing. The
Yeah.
perception is you're picking, but I do think that more intelligence around the data. You're absolutely right, and using AI to give better view into the warehouse operation is where operators are going to get more value. So that perception that we need to fix the picking problem. We saw that with the initial push for automation and robotics in the warehouse. It was
Yeah.
let's have everyone picking off of a robot,
Right.
and which is great. But we ignored some of the ancillary labor intense areas
Sure.
like
Yeah.
packing, like offloading containers.
Yeah.
These are traditionally very labor intense and very costly. Whereas I can throw people at picking all day, not the right solution.
Yeah.
But if a driver calls out sick, we've talked about this before. That's it's impactful. So I think similarly with AI, I think the perception is let's get more efficient picking. But I think when you look at areas like 3PL billing and cartonization, and these are areas where AI can be very impactful. And I think you'll see some really nice point solutions coming out around some other areas in the warehouse, and some solutions within WMS and other software in the warehouse that is going to address some of those other areas where AI is going to be extremely valuable. And so I'm excited about that going into to next year.
Yeah, and I think that's like a really great point, because I think it is. I mean, I agree with you. I think like picking is, it's so visible, right? That people are like, oh, there's just a lot of people in this area doing things, right? Like this must be like very, labor intensive. We have to automate it. But to your point, I've heard, several stories where they automated picking, and now all of a sudden they're like the other end, like they're out of totes, right? Or on the other end, there's like this huge backlog in packing, right? Because
Right.
they're still manual in packing. So it's like you have to figure out how do you flow through the whole
And
process, right?
that's exactly right. And you nailed it earlier when you said, you're a data guy in the warehouse. I also was.
Yeah.
But those are the that's where AI will be impactful. How do I make sure I don't run out of totes? How do I balance that work? Giving the operator, the ops manager, the warehouse manager, the ability to do that with a few, simple queries or a resource plan that's being AI generated and managed is going to have more impact than optimizing a pick tab that an algorithm's already doing.
Yeah. Absolutely, definitely. So
Might be controversial that
yeah, so very interesting there, and great insights, and we'll be looking forward to seeing what maybe some of the future features of SnapFulfil are later this year. So if people want to follow along or learn more about SnapFulfil, what's the best way to do that?
So check us out at snapfulfil.com. Definitely keep an eye on us as Q1 unfolds, and and come see us during all the fun trade shows, Manifest, IWLA, Modex.
Absolutely, I'm sure we'll see you there for sure.
Absolutely.
So all that information about SnapFulfil will be at thenewwarehouse.com, as well as in the show notes here. So thank you to Brian once again for stopping by our table here at the Element Logic Trade Show.
All right, thanks for having me.
Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning into today's video here on our YouTube channel, The New Warehouse Podcast, and I appreciate you tuning in. If you liked what you saw, make sure you subscribe to our channel, and if you like this video in particular, make sure you like it as well. And if you want to get this great t-shirt that you see in the video behind me, Warehouses Are Sexy, head to warehousesAreSexy.com and get your own.